Now we're moving right along to panel 4. This panel will be chaired by our own Dr. Ellen Larson, the Associate Director for the Center of the Art of East Asia and co-coordinator of this conference. And it will be called Curating Community, Decentralized Contemporary Art Spaces. So handing it over to Ellen. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. So I would like to begin by welcoming Min-hyung Kang to the stage. Min-hyung will be presenting a paper titled Translocality, Contemporary Struggles and Serendipities Around an Art Space Barim in South Korea.
Hello, hi. I hope you're not too tired because it's the last section, I think. As introduced, my name is Min-hyung, and I'm happy to be here today. And today I'll be talking about the independent art space called Barim in South Korea. And I founded and ran it for 10 years by myself from 2014 to 2024. And initially, I prepared a presentation about the previous exhibitions, performances, and education programs and public programs. But I kind of changed my presentation to talk a broader picture outside of the art space. And because I believe the born of the art spaces, independent art space is directly related to the society around it. And now I'm slightly regretting it because I'm not mentioning any artist or any artwork. And then I feel like probably I, pivoted in the wrong direction, but maybe this is a little break for you from art because you already had a full 2 days. But I'll talk more about the Korean context if you're not familiar with. And I just closed the art space last year, as I said, on 14 to 24, for many reasons. But I'm finding a way right now to continue the space in a way that is not a physical space. Right now, I'm based in South Korea, but I'm soon to be moving to the States. So that's another reason too. But still work in what's the way to work with the space, but not the space as a platform. And my question these days is that how to organize a decentralized platform that used to be a space, but not anymore. Can we do that? Or is that a weird question? And what is an independent art space anyway? And how does it work? And what do you do if you lose a physical space, but still own invisible values? And these questions are endless in my head. And I've been struggling with this about a year now. So please enlighten me after the presentation, because I learned so much from you guys all for these 2 days, and I hope to hear a feedback from you after the presentation. And Barim is a little experimental space. And then it manifested when it was still a space, it manifested a decentralized translocal art space. And when you think about the decentralization, because our section title is decentralization, the definition can be varied, I think. And if you're busy thinking about it, if you're busy thinking about it, I think the simple answer is that that's not central. Something not central is basically decentralized. But then you ask, like, what is central? And you fall into this irony of keep thinking about central to be decentralized. And to answer this, I first need to take you to a little story of the Korean current political situation, especially around the feminism. I wonder if you felt, do you ever feel a strange distortion of time and space when reality and the internet align perfectly, like matching missing puzzle? Because we encounter memes, texts, images every day. I'm speaking right now, but you're also on your phone, but you're also speaking to me. So you're facing this every day, going back and forth, the digital world and real world. And it's often said that when you're younger, the younger you are, the more fragmented your identities become. Fragment, another keyword that we've been talking about today. And I'm wondering if you see yourself as the same person online or in real life. And then many incidents could come up, and then I'm sure you can at least think of at least one incident, personal or social, and I also can recall several. And I want to share that before I talk about art. Sorry, it's not really about art, but it's gonna get there. So in 2015, a Korean teenage boy who was in Japanese hikikomori, basically, who shut himself in his room, not speaking to family or any friends, he joined ISIS through Twitter. And his journey from Twitter to Turkey and eventually to Syria was more than just adolescence rebellion. He left tons of a trail of tweets, not now X, but tweets full of hatred toward feminism, women, and society. This became a huge incident and sparked intense political gender debate in South Korea. So you hate women, you hate feminism, you hate them so much. So you hate it so much you join the ISIS army. And the process was rather very easy for him to join. You just go on a Twitter and then you just join it. And then he wrote a whole bunch of things, can I join it? And the whole DMs he got, he also left everything on internet. So if you're interested and you can read it. But so you go on a Twitter and then you join it. It was so easy for him. And I wonder what did internet meant to him at the time, and how did internet take him all the way to Syria? Exactly 10 years later, which is now 2025. Another example is that this discredit feminism, I'll continue from the tomorrow's girls trip, but from yesterday's talk, the discredit feminism didn't stop there, and it escalated it. 10 years later, which is now, Koreans impeached a notorious anti-feminist president who had revoked family and women-centered policies and was openly supported by right-wing incel communities online. So he was friendly, the impeached president. He was friendly with right-wing internet personalities and eager to join their man cave spaces. So, I mean, of course, the right-wing, we know that. I mean, you are obviously familiar with that, but this internet, right, with internet people, YouTubers were playing major roles to win him, and this is new actually. And the impeached president, he spoke to them, the right-wing internet people, in a public space. He wrote them open letters. They were his besties, and what I see the difference is that they were never outside. They were always stayed in the internet. They would act like they're normal people, and you met them at work and school. But then right now they're just out there. You can find them on the street. They're not on internet anymore. And they ran out to the street and became a riot. So a lot of violence happened on the street. And this was actually the moment they revealed themselves outside of the digital world. And but they were exactly the same people, but anyway, they exposed themselves outside. And this was a new kind. And I'm only bringing up these stories because independent art spaces are born in under this kind of circumstances only, I think, when you're really happy, when you're really satisfied with your life and everything. Usually you're not really waking up thinking like, I want to make an art space. But then maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, another example, maybe I'm pessimistic, I don't know. Another example is that the protest, I'm not sure you've heard of this whole K-pop protesting in Korea, but it's not just K-pop, like always. Of course, there were many protests before this whole impeachment and right-wing and YouTubers, the kind of thing happened. People always protested. But this time, the protest was a little different. Instead of holding slogans, I'm having a little QR code in case you want to read more. I hope it works. So this time the protests were a little different. Instead of holding like unified slogans, like everyone carried their own personal slogans. So you make your own signs became a thing. It became a huge trend. And it became a meme, and also the messages were very personal, quirky, and often really not making any sense. Oh, okay. Okay, you get that, right? So maybe no sound, yeah. So this is not just one or two, 2 or 3 people doing that. And you can have more of this information if you go that QR code on New York Times. But then for example, when you're going to protest, it's like Association for Democracy or like a National something Assembly, Student Union or something like that. But people were like, oh, okay. Hope you can still see it. Sorry, it's just too small. But things are like, I want to lie in my bed association or like National Fat Cat Assembly. I love my dog, or like the things you're seeing right now is that I'm behind the schedule. So association of people who's behind schedule, also all the sorts. And everyone did it. I did it. And Ellen actually was in Korea at the time, and we also marched together. But then anyway, this became a huge trend. And this started also from social networks. So a lot of feminists that I wanted to mention that who hide behind the monitors, and you know why they were hiding, because if you attended yesterday's talk by TGT, that Asian women, a lot of East Asian women are, kind of scared to call themselves feminists and go out there. And then they actually went out to the streets thanks to these memes. Now it became a kind of easier thing that you don't have to wear this feminist whatever the thing to go out on the street. You can just make your own memes and go out. It's a good excuse. And this seemingly unharmful and easy trend made women actually physically go out. And and then the quote from New York Times by Lee Ki-hoon, a professor of modern Korean history at Yonsei University in Seoul, said the flags were a way to express and stimulate the diversity of people galvanized by the president's attempt to impose military rule. And quote, they're trying to say, even for those of us who have nothing to do with the political groups or not a member party, for them even the situation was unacceptable. Okay, let's just keep playing, right? So this was a new face of feminism to me. I know that as a feminist myself, I sometimes create exhibitions and talks and programs about feminism, but as TGT, we always have to speak loudly about it and always like have to insist it. But as you know, the most difficult thing is to convince people who are indifferent. Sometimes you feel like persuasion and fighting are easier than talking to people who just do not care. So in this new phenomenon, making people, especially very closed people or closed feminists who only exist in online, who reveal themselves on internet, they come out to the street with their own flags and slogan. So I think it was a type of revolution, and it is difficult to achieve. And I see new possibility in future of feminism. And I love the way how it was not forceful, not something like didactic or not even loud. And in this way, the most non-political act, creating or embodying a meme, became political. And the act of creating a meme or bringing my Twitter ego out there was subversively a political gesture. This crossover between Twitter, so self-centered, lazy, seemingly indifferent, I don't care kind of the Twitter, and the real life protests, who often outdoor, energetic, active, merged into one, and it became very borderless. And this was the time that I see another example from the teenage boy, but different example of seeing how the internet becomes life and life becomes internet. And why am I telling you all of this? Because I'm supposed to introduce an art space. First, I'll give you a little bit more information about the space and the context. So the art space Barim is located in Gwangju, southern city known for, I think So-yoon today briefly mentioned about it, about the Gwangju uprising or the massacre. It is a southern city known for its democratic uprising in the 1980s against the dictatorship. And like many countries with a history of resistance, a lot of people died and most of them are students. And this was the people, this is the information people know about the city. And this is such a heavy history. And opening an art space in such a historically wounded city meant for me dealing with much more than art. Because Gwangju, the liberal city, was, because we had for a long time, we had a conservative government. The city was long neglected by the central government. What I'm saying central is the conservative government, and its history was erased and ignored for a long time. So, but then at the same time, feminism, equality, LGBTQI, non-human rights, and those things they existed, but because of this capital A history, they were also hidden and overshadowed by the capital H history. And And then outside of the Gwangju, that's what's happening in the city Gwangju, where the art space is located. And but outside of the Gwangju in Korea, when Barim was founded in 2013-14, I must say I was not the only one, because there was a huge trend called, if I directly translate it from Korean, it's a new space movement or a newborn space movement. And then in this trend or movement, many art spaces, 99% of them are in Seoul, but anyway, they were born in a spirit of agency, survival, DIY, and etc., possibly against the dependency of national and public institutions, museums, and academia and grants. And after 10 years by now, and a lot of them are now gone, and me and a few art spaces survived. And I guess I'm not either, because I just closed it. But I'm wondering why this movement had to happen. Like what motivated this whole surge of like art spaces, like I want to make an art space kind of movement. And there were many artists who were created at the same time. And I go to the idea of sort of decentralization that I manifested it. And because my MA is from the MA I did in Tokyo was about the decentralized internet at the time. So when you look at the decentralization of network, you usually see this kind of a picture. But I refer also Roundabout Revolution by Yael Weissman discussing how the traffic roundabouts have become setting for uprising around the world, not only in Gwangju, but any other spaces. So the space, the shapes could be really circular. And maybe location does not matter. And because okay, it's fading, right? So when Barim is gone, and when I think about the decentralization, maybe it's something about this borderless, becoming borderless, like from the internet and the digital, that this space is not about, because usually when I think about decentralization, usually it's not in the central, but I start to thinking in a different way of that location does not matter, and the central does not really matter. And then recent project I did was that the post-localization syndrome. I created several programs under this concept because localization is a word used recently in the commercial field these days. And localization first emerged after World War II. And in the business term, it means that tailoring your products to specific countries to increase the profit. And it's used a lot in IT or gaming these days. And then I'm particularly interested in especially what's happening after localization. So if something is localized in a foreign land, what remains afterward, and what's the cultural effect, and what's the stereotype? And I wanted to connect this to the idea of decentralization and create a few programs. I just don't have time today to introduce. Maybe I can talk to you later. And then lastly, so Barim was a small art space in a non-central city with a city with the rich past. And as much we honor the history, but ironically, we also have to fight against its ghost, because the capital H history suffocates us sometimes, and feminism as well. We try to find our friends while we fight, but I sometimes feel powerless and talking to a wall. But however, the examples I've talked to you about the internet, they're not just good old internet that we know. It's a different internet now. It overpowers reality, and things can start, on the internet, everything starts on internet these days, I think. So I'm questioning the future of decentralized art space Barim. I came to think that I do not want to bound to the physical space. And if it can happen, I think there's still a way to practice decentralized practices without a physical space. And it is weird to say this, but the decentralization maybe can be possible without any center. So we have a physical location, but the words does not seem to necessarily require a physical space to practice. And I'm not saying this that we do not need any space. I'm only suggesting a way to think about decentralization without centralization. And so we are not haunted by the ghost of centralization. And last year, I published this book with friends about what it means to end the space. And you can read the whole thing on this QR code. It's on our website. And people say a lot of things about opening something and starting something and very exciting. But this publication was made to think about what a good ending is and how can you start again from ending. And I never met Alan Longino, but however, I walking into his little space, art space yesterday after going through some stairs and doors. I had a mixture of feelings. And then what kind of conversation could have done and if it was here. So I'm still looking for an answer of the physical space or non-physical space, and maybe I'm leaving the physical space to be truly decentralized, or maybe I could never leave. But this is something, some of the questions I have after running an independent art space for 10 years. Why do we need a physical space? What do you do this after that? How do you end the space? And I think that really overlaps with the situation of the symposium, but and Ellen and how he wanted to do and his desires that I could see through his space, the exhibition yesterday. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Min. Our next presenter is Tongji Phil Qian, who will be presenting a paper titled #Not Always the Right Thing. Please join me in welcoming Phil.
Introduction. May 2015, Dali, China. It is odd that my students are only interested in the intersection between art and math. They're not really into math or art. After all, students often skipped math classes and they rarely had an art class before I arrived in 2013. Why are they not patient with geometry problem sets or observational drawings, yet showed extreme focus when deciphering Solowitz's awkward instructions? Just for that unsexy quadrangle? I see an opening in the foothills of a Buddhist mountain in Yunnan to ponder the value of conceptualism and art without any concern or necessity for proper definitions. December 2019, Beacon, New York. The manner is as follows. When you come to the room, put away wings and be seated properly on the floor. Feel free to touch thoroughly to participate in this rite. Never ever touch breasts. Such were the instructions on the invitation from Matsuzawa Yutaka for his Sashiki room installation in Shimo Suwa, which he sent to a Tokyo-based critic in 1963. The instructions seemed precise, powerful, yet peculiar. On the one hand, visitors would understand the desired way to enter the room due to these concrete guidelines. On the other hand, I imagine very few visitors went to the installation site given the distance from Tokyo to Shimosuwa. What then is the work if the real installation will not be seen? Does the nearly folded invitation replace the actual installation as artwork? I'm also reminded that I should never assume what it will feel like to receive this invitation in the mail. Perhaps it is only through this vicarious way of experiencing the installation, the invitation, and the story that the distance to what really happened or could happen is spelled out. Matsuzawa capitalized its location elsewhere. Although Matsuzawa's Sashiki room is but one anecdote in his Protean career, I'm inspired by his affiliation with remote sites. It also appears that Matsuzawa provided other artists in rural Japan with an exemplary model and optimism. For instance, group Ultra Nikata, commonly known as Gun, staged an event to change the image of snow in 1970. Although the scale was fundamentally different, this project of the collective was similarly romantic and imaginative. Additionally, the event had presumably few audience, and documentation became an active archive, which continues to inform our indirect perception today. March 2024, Chicago, Illinois. I finally feel ready to visit the Spiral Jetty, and I'm toying with the idea to make it work on site. To be clear, I'm not attempting to activate the jetty. I believe climate change has contributed a poignant dimension after Robert Smithson left it in 1970. I naturally turned to Grappa, my dog, because a series with his involvement 2 years prior at the Fine Arts Work Center provides thoughts and questions. At that time, I was simultaneously surprised and impressed that my Shanghai homies could stay at all positive during the lockdown and exercise to the sun Compendium of Materia Medica of J. Cho. I thus asked Ada and Grappa to move on 2 coated etching plates with the music while in residence in P-Town. Their footsteps engendered mark-making mechanisms. Well, Ada obliged and moved, but Grappa had to be moved. Somebody recently commented that the series was like a family portrait and asked whether a third etching existed for me. I said no, and have since been lamenting the fact that I signed the etchings to my name. I may have controlled too much. I should leave more space and trust the power of storytelling and its misunderstandings grounded in the visuals. Chapter 1. It dawned on me when I encountered the Guizhou Yangdeng Art Collective through a Brooklyn Rail talk in fall 2022 that they were happy. Yangdeng Art Collective was founded by a group of faculty and students from the Sichuan Fine Arts Institute in Chongqing in 2012, who were committed to experimental collaborations with rural villagers. Some residents in Yangdeng were trained as carpenters, and I imagine the sculpture department was drawn to the fact that the villagers were hands-on. A series of curious projects immediately unfolded. The students and faculty suggested that the breakfast stall could dual function as a museum and asked the carpenters to alter the tables. Because of the familiarity of depicted objects, such as motorcycle keys and cigarettes, some people tried picking them up but were amused that they were glued objects. Also, the local middle school needed sculptures to adorn campus, and they found 4 sculptures from a disused factory representing Ernest Hemingway, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Gustave Flaubert, and George Bernard Shaw. The principal thought it would be nice if 2 out of the 4 were scientists, and asked artists whether they could make a transformation. The artists decided to only create labels to turn Flaubert into Isaac Newton and Shaw into Galileo Galilei. The statues remain untouched. People could not tell anyway. Another project appropriated the fake police statues seen occasionally on highways to caution drivers, and they placed one by the Yangdeng River to not only thwart kids from swimming, but also create a landmark and talisman for Yangdeng. In the artist's words, having no character in Yangdeng might be the character before they had arrived. When I received the opportunity to organize an exhibition for the Yangdeng Art Collective at the University of Chicago Center in Beijing in 2024, I intended to capture the combination of amusement, curiosity, and complexity. And I was sure that I needed to stay true to my artist sensibility when realizing this artistic presentation. My experience in rural Yunnan, which is not too far from Yangdeng, reminded me that I should never assume how the lack of formal education would imply a dearth of intellectual depth. Matsudawa's trust in imagination, on the other hand, incorporated into the work a discussion on the intrinsic logic and maybe hierarchy within a multi-part experience, which extended an invitation to reimagine divergently, even without spectatorship. Lastly, my mistake in signing the etchings to my name and Grappa's video at the Spiral Jetty showcased the potential of implicit and intentionally unclaimed features in a work of art. Along the same line, I did not want to theorize and historicize the past decade for the Yangdeng Art Collective in this exhibition. And it was not my desire to forward arguments with a formal anthropological and sociological framework on why the Yangdeng Art Collective could survive and thrive. In fact, a number of anthropologists have written insightfully and extensively on the collective, but I thought one thing was sadly missing. I needed to highlight their work. The idea of an open call and a commission emerged. I will create parameters for an exhibition experience, like the number and size of the artworks, but the subject matter and choice of materials will be up to individual artists. It was also important to me that artists should collectively determine the works for Beijing and not up to individual leaders in the Sichuan Fine Arts Institute or me. In other words, a public vote could take place before the artworks will travel to Beijing. Because of the exhibition scheduling at the U Chicago Center in Beijing, I was also informed during our very first production meeting in August 2024 that they will want something in the gallery as soon as possible. They might have asked me whether the exhibition could open the following week, and I mentioned that the works have not been made, but I will come up with something. Eventually, I decided on a 3-part exhibition focusing on context, artwork, and reception of the Yangdeng Art Collective. Chapter 2. Part 0 began in October 2024, Part 1 in December 2024, and Part 2 in April 2025. Part 0 served as a preface, using wall writings to cite pre-existing literature on Yangdeng and convey my own reflection while visiting Yangdeng. Because the script was bilingual, I invited 2 Beijing-based artists, Lu Tianqi and Fiamma Kabulani, to write on the wall with English translations from Baidu and Chinese translation from Google. They came from 2 countries and must have experienced different environments with language learning in English and Chinese. Therefore, their marks on the wall provided a subtle dimension of difference. This kind of aberration, embedded primarily in language, became productive ingredient for Part 0, which was titled Annotations. Part 1 initiated with an open call, which was published on the WeChat channel of the Yangdeng Art Collective on October 19, 2024, inviting artists from around and around Yangdeng to submit artworks for the exhibition in Beijing. I now quote the brief open call. The works should be 2-dimensional and made in Yangdeng in October and November 2024. The reference size is 50 by 50 centimeters and no restrictions on material choices, works on paper, canvas, mixed media, etc., but limited to 2-dimensional works. 12 works will be selected for the exhibition in Beijing. A public exhibition and vote took place 43 days later at the Yangdeng Art Museum on December 1st. During the 3-hour exhibition, each visitor had 12 votes, and the audience determined the works which should represent the Yangdeng Art Collective in Beijing. The group of 12 was translated to Tongji the same evening, ready to be scanned the next day. When the works on papers were about to be framed, I asked artists how they would choose the color and width of the wood. I then followed thoughts from each artist and forwarded their thoughts to the framer without any editing. If a teenager artist wanted vibrant red for the frame, why not? The works were then created and shipped to Beijing. A surprise for me was that 3 artists collaborated on one painting and formally declared the founding of Group X as a quasi-subset of the Yangdeng Art Collective. Hence, 14 artists instead of 12 were chosen. I installed the exhibition with 2 assistants in the middle of December, shortly after the works arrived. This part was titled 8 Sheep and 4 Rocks because of the following reasons. First, this exhibition was designed to create resonance with a benefit exhibition in 2016 titled 12 Sceneries in Yangdeng, where faculty from the Sichuan Fine Arts Institute made watercolors to depict Yangdeng sceneries so they could print them as postcards to sell to tourists who ran rafting in the area. Second, this exhibition aimed to highlight artists living in Yangdeng, so it reserved 8 spots for artists from Yangdeng as well as its immediate vicinity, and 4 spots for artists based elsewhere. The vote eventually offered 10 spots to Yangdeng artists because the 3 above-mentioned artists in Chongqing collaborated to make one painting occupy only 1 spot. Third, the gallery at the U Chicago Center in Beijing, although modest in size, had 4 doors, leading to different areas like the auditorium, the classroom, the VIP room, and the elevator. I recognized that it must have been part of the design strategies when establishing the center in the 2010s. I thus indirectly quoted the number 4 in the exhibition title because the gallery is almost the center of the center. Lastly, and most idiosyncratically, Yang means sheep in Chinese, and the character Deng had rocks as its radical. Part 2 of the show, also the last phase, was titled Among Others, inviting US and China-based artists, writers, and curators to respond to this exhibition through drawn images on postcards. A number of you are here, so many thanks again. I was responsible for sending and collecting postcards from artists from Chicago. And the president and vice president of the Yangdeng Art Collective co-led the initiative in China. The postcards were installed outside the gallery in the corridor, together with 2 large-scale wall drawings from the artists who wrote on the gallery walls for the first part of the show. Chapter 3. Ultimately, rather than curating the exhibition, I orchestrated this experience to uplift artists' autonomy from the Yangdeng Art Collective, the openness of which, while thrilling for the most part, came with uncertainties. Not seeing or knowing the works until a week before I installed in Beijing posed challenges because mental gymnastics could not take place. In fact, only 1 out of the 12 works chosen by the public adhered to the parameters in the open call, and other artists either overlooked the size restraint or chose to do it their way. About half of the selected works were not specifically created for the Beijing show, and I assumed the collective upcycled previous works to enrich the 3-hour exhibition in preparation for the public vote. In this sense, the open call was almost superficial and self-fulfilling. I myself missed the vote because I was traveling from Chicago to Yangdeng, and I remain unsure how the process went. To be frank, I would be a C on site if the democratic process were grounded in exceptions. Therefore, I had no choice but to accept the 12 as favorites from the public. On the other hand, during the run of the show, artists requested a wide range of documents, including the certificate of exhibition, invitation to symposia, and the certificate of attendance. My colleagues at the center in Beijing accommodated all such requests, for which I am grateful. That said, the range of the chosen work was compelling, and the subject matter covered what I expected, such as landscape and farming tools in Yangdeng, but it also embodied an original sense of playfulness. Because I asked each artist to give me around 50 words for the exhibition booklet, which I did not edit, I learned, for instance, that the collaborative painting from Group X was based on the desire to have this blossoming stool, quote, move forward and tour the world, end of quote. Another work from Liao Denghai, titled Bathing Scene of a Yellow Peach, was created to, quote, laugh in Beijing and continue somewhere farther until the very end, end of quote. The show also included the first ever paintings by Qian, a local park ranger who came to the Yangdeng Art Museum the morning of the public vote. According to him, it was unimaginable that his work could be well received because they were barely dry when the vote happened. After I finished installing the show in Beijing and shared images in the WeChat Yangdeng group, somebody texted me that the exhibition stimulated additional artists in Yangdeng who were painting that night until 9:30 p.m. Cheng Bilan, an artist approaching her late 70s, had never been to Beijing before 2025, but she visited the nation's capital 3 times within the past 2 months to see the show, to attend an event, and to participate as a panelist for a symposium I organized at the center in Beijing. She told her grandson that Beijing no longer felt so far. Traveling to Beijing was like taking a bus now. Coda. I thought often about Alan and Longino IAH when staging the exhibition in Beijing. In an overt way, Alan raised the bar of on-campus, non-academic art spaces at the University of Chicago forever. Covertly, his commitment to recognizing and accepting the space as is, rather than purposeless transformation, reveals new direction surrounding independent thinking and possibly counterculturalism. And I hope the history of Longino IAH, although brief, will nudge conventions in the context of education and on art and art history. Just to end with my original impression on the Yangdeng Art Collective, if I may. They were happy. And they still seem to be after the show. I hope we'll all stay true to the power of meaning and joy. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Phil. Our final speaker this afternoon is Cheng Xu, whose paper is titled, "Is That Art? Games and Tech as Media." Please join me in welcoming Cheng.
Hi. As I stand here between you and the dinner, I promise this will be one on time. I'm Cheng. I was born in China, and like many of us, has traveled to United States for studying technology, and I stayed in San Francisco, in the center of Silicon Valley, and worked there until a year and a half ago. I joined the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco as their curator for games and technology, which begs many questions that I had to make a meme to explain that. Or for my family, I am in a very square building taking care of very precious things, where for my friends, they understand the game and tech part, so I'm plugged into the future in the VR and never coming back. And for my coworkers at the Asian Art Museum, they knew that I had started my work as Imagineer at Disney and worked in tech. So for them, I'm the one that make art look back at you and interact with you, and I'm that magician. And what you actually do every day sometimes you get on the lift and then change your light bulb. So this is half a joke, but half a kind of a picture of like how people understand the world really come from their bias of what they already know. And for me, I stand in this kind of curious and sometimes uncomfortable position of not going into any of these holes. And so today I'm going to talk about the RAD initiative I have at the Asian Art Museum. So this is a gallery space that's slightly bigger than this room. And since I joined, I've transformed it into this space that has projectors on the floor, on the wall, and turning it into a very immersive digital theater for the display of digital interactive art. And we also have part of the space, kind of like this part where if you imagine where we're sitting is the stage where the art is happening, we also kind of have this back end where artists and I sit in the development side, where we can get to observe, we get to control, we get to change things, and it's really embracing the spirit of research and development and that iterative process as our approach to contemporary art. And so I'm going to show you a few examples of what we did there and the challenges we face. We have run video games in this space. And so I'm going to point out one that's on the top left. This is a video game that was done by Tomo Kihara from Japan, and the Playful, spelled as Playful, Playful, from UK. And they have this video game called How Not to Get Hit by a Self-Driving Car. So the mechanism of the game is that you stand on this side of the room, you push the button to cross the street, and you walk across the vinyl we put down, while a camera is looking at you. So your goal is to pretend you're not a human so that you can get hit by a self-driving car. The actual play of this game is mostly people standing in line and watching other people fail. Because at our age, AI is already very sophisticated and very good at recognizing you, which is very comforting, given that this is the same technology that Tesla is using these days to recognize you. However, in February 2024, we did have an instance in San Francisco of someone who has a bike, looking slightly weird to the sensor, I guess, got struck by a self-driving car. And so in a month later in March, we're able to invite the artists to come over and then have this exhibition on. And so what I think was achieved by this exhibition is that, one, we're the only gallery space in the museum that has encouraged people to roll around, backflip, hold hands, and then try to fool AI. And then we really activate their entire body as an instrument to like engage in this piece of art. What we also managed to do is that if you think about AI, think about surveillance, this piece is essentially return that gaze for you to look at AI interacting with the players and be, what are you actually looking for in humanity? And what do you actually recognize as human? How can I fool you? And in that way, we have rejected the very common scenario, very common narrative of AI is here to ruin your life, or the AI is here to make you super rich. But rather just put both of you on the playground and have a little conversation or a little competition. And I tell you, the element of competition is really profound. The willingness to play comes from watching someone else fail and be, I can do better, and really run up and then and play it. And so we had fun with that in a really timely manner, echoing what's happening in San Francisco in the street. I also want to talk about this one on the right. This is our game called Seed of Light that was done together with a company called That Game Company. And so players enter the room often confused, or there's nothing in the entire room, it's just empty. But then as we turn on the music and the digital display, they were given the projectors, they were given the seed that image slides that's metaphor for light, for the light being the metaphor of life and hope. They start to play, and you can kind of tell they're playing a version of Snake. You're getting resources, and you're running away from other people trying to take your resources. And so if you think about video game, you think of people on their couch at home playing. And the entire reason that we would do it at the museum, right, is to take you out of that context and bring you in the same room as other strangers. Kind of force you into this little encounter, little gameplay, little competition. And at the end, for this particular game, we want to have gone through a little emotional journey together, becoming friends, becoming competitive, kill each other in the competition, and then like come to serenity. In that very, very brief story of life, realize that maybe you all share something in common, that you're all connected. And then by the time you exit the game, would you be a little kinder to strangers, right? So that's two examples of the game we play. You can go to hnr.org/rad to see more of them. We also run live performances. And this one on the left is by artists Cheng, Dan Gorlick, and Osman Kosh. And what they were doing is they took guqin, which could be an object that's in the museum behind the glasses, took it out, not literally, and had it augmented through synthesizers together with a cello on your right to improvise. And meanwhile, we have these images that's rendered real time as one interpretation of the emotion of the music. And the technology that's driving the images is a game engine called Unity. I think this was a very successful performance because towards the end of the show, as you hear the war and the peace and the regrets from the music, someone cried. And I want to say that even though you might come into an empty room feeling slightly surprised that there is no object, no center of art for you to look at, the emotion raised from having spent time there with each other and experiencing something. And if that's not art, what is? I'm also excited to see that a game engine that's built for delivering a video game that has its own stereotypical concept around them to be reused and repurposed here as a way to visualize music. And I love that almost as a little creative resistance, because if you think about technology, when you think about computer being invented, computer was invented 80 years ago. Well, computer was released as a technology that is accessible for public 80 years ago after World War II was announced to have ended. And now that's what made available for us. AI and computer vision largely was there because of need for robotics. A lot of advanced computation was needed because of the space science. And then we artists kind of sneak in from the back door and be like, oh, shiny, let's build something with it. And then let's see what that means for us, for the society and for the future of us. And so when we see that artists take AI, take game engines and subvert the original purpose of it and start building art pieces that people can participate, I think is a really good direction to go, where humanity take the control of that and then shine some light on the new direction you could go with that. And so RAD is not open all the time, but when we do, we attract large number of audiences that are out of the usual stats of the visitors that come to Asian Art Museum. And so these are the curious and Silicon Valley younger generation that's mostly tech savvy coming in to see Deviation game, which is going to VNA for a showcase. The self-driving car game went later to the RC Electronica last year to be shown. And I was very excited that Asian Art Museum was there first. And because sometimes you are chasing the trends of contemporary art and I have some pride. I'm competitive. I'm raised by my Asian parents, right? I want to be there first. And I was really excited that the stuff that we are curating as Asian and the museum is curating as the Asian Art Museum is being showcased globally. And so here are some of the technical difficulties. In RAD. And you can see that even though there's mention of technology, it's not just a tool that we use to achieve the art, rather it's the subject of discussion. What we really want to engage people with is the emotion that comes out of the play and the experiences. And in this way, we are treating technology not as a tool, but rather a media, a new language that artists can use. And by placing RAD in Asian Art Museum, we kind of want to have it available to the public and not be stopped by the barrier of the cost of technology. So over the year of 2024, we have run games and performances interactive installations. We run user research sessions because remember half of the, a fifth of the room is where we get to be there to observe and iterate the games and the experiences. And we also hosted a lot of artist talks where for us it's very important for a contemporary piece of art. We want there to be a face that's associated with them and get people to really have a space to have discussions and have debates about technology, have this common ground where the narrative around the tech can be subverted by this art activations. And so in the last 3 slides will be my attempt to answer some of the questions I'm always asked. One is that art? As we are showing the interactive installations, and for me, technology, AI, VR, all of this are media, not the goal for artists to say something with it. But then with this new tool to speak, you come with new aesthetics that's not available with the traditional ones. And there is a process to learn this new language. And this is our answer to how to do that. And it's also something that the context of Asian Art Museum, the Silicon Valley, is very familiar with. And then by embracing the process they are familiar with, we're also trying to embrace the community that is familiar with that process. And if anyone is running into funding difficulties, we're there too. And if we don't engage the audience now to pull them in, how do we grow with them to be able to sustain our practice later? Another questions we have is, why do it now? Why now? And here I quote the words from Cybernetic Serendipity, which is the first new media show that was in London in 1968. And they say, cybernetic serendipity deals with possibilities rather than achievements. And in this sense, it is prematurely optimistic. And I want to highlight the word optimistic, because in the way that technology is covered by news, we have this very dramatic doom sense that's very popular. And with that doom sense, how do you still have a different narrative and then be able to elicit some curiosity, some optimism from that? I think a museum is a place for the public to explore and contemplate the influence technology and how in their everyday life they could react to those changes and take on a critical lens that the artists have offered through the shows. This does bring us to the challenge of speed versus the test of time. Because if you consider museum, this is where we have seen artwork that's filtered through time, and this is a classic of a classic, and that's how we got in. But then if you ask me to schedule an AI show now, it will be on schedule in 3 years, and then our existence might have changed greatly by that time. And so in building a faster response to the changing of the technology and the landscape, we are also foregoing some of the established format of a museum. And that is a challenge that I'm facing, and I believe all of you are facing when you deal with media art. And that's something that I want to throw, a question that I want you all to help answer as well. And finally, there are questions about why here, why are you, what's Asian about the exhibitions? And I find that one come from this assumption that we are ready to see a waste that is unearthed somewhere in Japan, and that's Asian art. But when we talk about the creation from contemporary art, the art from the contemporary art artists that's dealing with code as their media, then it's a little blurry. And But I reject the division there. As me who live as a Asian, that when I'm in the supermarket, someone may push me and ask me to clean up the shelves, right? There is this horrible division of like, we love your culture and from a long time ago, and we love your food that you're cooking in the restaurant, but we may not see you more than an alien that's taking our jobs. And for me, creating art and representing art for the Asian and Asian Americans is one way to resist that narrative. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Cheng. I would like to invite our 3 presenters to join in a conversation up front. So once again, thank you so much to the 3 of you for your wonderfully rich presentations. I think that there's also a lot of really great through lines. I think that in each of your presentations, we see these connections that emerge that I think are offering a collective articulation of issues relating to decentralization, also experimentation, and reimagined community practices within the context of contemporary Asian art. So, I see beginning with Phil's presentation as emphasizing this kind of non-metropolitan or rural context for focusing on Yangdeng Art Collective in Guizhou. The collective's autonomy, rural location, and bottom-up, as well as democratized approach to exhibition making really highlights alternative paths outside of the urban contemporary art centers in China, but does not negate them altogether. Likewise, I think that Min's presentation really, in centering on this concept of decentralization geographically outside of Seoul, as well as ideologically existing outside of major institutional frameworks, and then also effectively thinking about dispersed identities both online and offline. You're doing this really interesting work where you're positioning Barham in Gwangju as an anti-central model that resists dominant cultural narratives, and also suggests that decentralization lies, within this interesting relationship to centralization. I think decentralization without centralization is something that I would like to think about a lot more, and also invite all of us to think about. And then finally, Cheng's presentation, I think that you're really doing this wonderful job of echoing decentralization by transforming a major museum institution. After all, the museum is called the Asian Art Museum, right? Really one of its kind, based in San Francisco. And so you're transforming, what was at one time a very, shall we say, conservative institution. I mean, the Contemporary Art Department is a very new addition to the museum. It was only added exactly in the last 6 years, so less than 10 years, right? And so you're taking this kind of traditionally conservative institution and you're really transforming it into this playground, and also this kind of we might think of as kind of a backstage for experimentation, but you are inviting the audience in, right? And the audience, the way that space is set up, they're invited to see that, how you describe this as the 1/5 of the space, and you can sort of see various forms of experimentation. And so I think in that way, you're doing this really interesting work of questioning whether traditional museum frameworks, how they serve within the present, especially within Silicon Valley, which is another very interesting context that you bring up. And so I think through though institutional, right? We are talking about a museum framework. I think that RAD, it functions in a very subversive way, a decentralized register within the museum, especially, within this this very technology forward ecosystem of Silicon Valley. And so, one of the things that really is very clear in all of your presentations also is these issues of collective authorship. And so I think that that's kind of what I'm interested in thinking with the three of you right now. And so I'm also interested in kind of thinking about that reconfiguring the role of the institution. And so, Phil, thinking about how you're leveraging the University of Chicago Center in Beijing as a staging ground for, your curatorial work. And I would also like to emphasize your very democratic curatorial work, right? I think, the idea that you are, you're not editing, right? I think that's so subversive. I love it. And so you're really shifting institutional power towards artists and towards your collaborators. And so, also thinking, Cheng, the way that you're using RAD to reconfigure the museum as something that's living, it's adaptive, rather, than kind of like this shrine to permanence, especially within the context of a cultural heritage museum, right? And then, Min, I think Barum really critiques, as you mentioned, this capital H history and central power by offering an intimate alternative. And so I guess just to throw out a question to get you talking and Min to stop talking, is how do you leverage the institution in your work? And please feel free to think about, institution in whichever way makes the most sense. So yeah, and maybe you could also describe some tensions that emerge within your work and also your collaborations. Or we could talk about something else.
I was caught by the eye contact. That was a great run of the questions. I'm hearing there's something that was on my mind. It's I hear you about you talk about trying to evade the Sichuan Art Academy from like making decisions, this like kind of a central decision making. And I saw how there's a kind of a leap here. When we showed some beautiful piece of interactive art and people couldn't quite understand how is this done, they will ask, is that AI? There seems to be a tendency that we want some kind of central decision maker, something superior. And so if I don't know how to do it, then this is superior AI has done it. And then if someone superior to me came and nod at my art, then it's better. Now I'm approved to be good. So I feel like institutions sometimes take on that kind of role, and it's somewhat dangerous to also take on that attitude. Avoid eye contact.
Yeah, so you can go last. I didn't have time to mention this, but I kind of wanted to, not my practice, but I was briefly telling you about the new space movement. And I find it quite interesting. And I'm not an art historian, but I think someone should study that in an art historical way, because there was a big independent art space movement in 90s in Korea, but ever since that, nothing ever. I mean, there were art spaces, but there was no movement. And then suddenly in 2013, 14, there's a movement. I'm pretty sure there's a reason behind, and I honestly don't know 100%, even though I'm a part of it. But I think it goes back to the resistance to institutional powers. I think that should be one of the reasons, because I think as the globalization, as the first section we talked about the globalization today, that exists, and Korean governments try to invest a lot of money in art and culture, I think actively from 2010-ish. I think that has to do with it. But I always made this joke to international art friends, now to you guys, is that the rich people in Korea, or the politicians, their wives are always curators. But not everyone, of course. But like I told you that we just impeached the president, and his wife is a curator. And now we have a very popular running candidate for the presidency, because we have to do the new election, obviously. And his wife is also a curator. And then if you go to Seoul, you're going to go to Liu Museum and Art Sanjay, those famous museums, and they're wife of Samsung and they're wife of Daewoo. So I think like, yeah, so like whose wife am I? But I don't know, nobody. But anyway, so the point is that and heavily the grant and then probably, I mean, the artists grant or the support system is heavily by the government in Korea. So 80%, 90% of the grants you get when you want to make art is from government. And it sounds like a great thing, but actually it has a downside flip of the coin that you always need government to do your art. So that institutional, not only in a way of I mean, institution in general, including public institution, national institution, or private institution, or rich people, or the politicians. If you look at it, and there are tons of things that's done by them, and maybe it kind of stimulated the new space movement, and it's kind of sad that it doesn't continue. But the good side is that people were all about acting. So I want to make a space that was demotivation, and they didn't really think about, including myself, sustainability, because it was kind of the revolutionary kind of thing, and then it's important to act rather than thinking about doing it continuously. And now, as my presentation says, that I'm thinking about how to end things. When you start something with like eager, like I really want to do this, we have to act, everyone is curator, they're all wives of someone, you got to do this, something about it. And then now 10 years, what has left, and I think it's art historically also interesting to study that, going back and forth with modernization, globalization, all this aspect. So I think just wanted to mention there was this movement, sort of DIY, making your own space kind of movement against the institutional powers, and I think it's a good example to share.
Maybe that's why I'm not too interested in the label of a curator. I think that sometimes the identity of an artist comes into some contact with the definition of both terms. And I think that I did not want to let go of my artist sensibility in this adventure. And I think that I was talking to Deborah Balkan, who's my mentor and a great friend. She used the term orchestrate. And I think that that's a very accurate way to describe my activities. And I think back to the institutions, I think that this project would not be possible without Chuanmei, without the Sichuan Fine Arts Institute, because I was not there on the ground. I was only there for 6 weeks in total. So I think that my primary negotiation with them is how not to make that into a 文献展, so something like dealing with archives, because I want something that's more forward-looking, hence the kind of extra funding from not only the university here, but also the center in Beijing really helped, so that artists could be paid, and then they could be invited to the symposium, and then they can, consider going to Beijing like taking a bus. And I think that such kind of anecdotes are really meaningful for me, because I think that when I spend time in southwestern China, I realize that everything else is just so far. And I think that if we can shorten the distance between any two places, it's probably the kind of character and value of this exhibition.
I'm also interested in talking more about your thoughts related to collaboration, the importance of collaboration in all of your works, and how collaboration fits into the kind of decentralized work that each of you are engaging in.
If you're the first one to answer, it doesn't have to be the best. And so I want to give it mention this this Chinese opera performance we did. That's called Dao Ma Dan in Lesbos, and it is a plot twist on the traditional Chinese opera plot to have a gender switch and a time leap in the show. And it is a work in progress, but we invited artists to take on this digital stage to see how they can develop their show further in our space. And considering that the main artist for this, Shang-Chi, has been doing LGBTQ work in China for her entire life. And as the political environment tightened, she escaped to China and, to the United States. She kind of got dropped into this environment with new language. We played on that, and we have the Chinese on one side of the wall, and then the English translation on the other, so that if you're looking at one, you don't get the context of another, and then you're constantly switching between trying to understand, as a way to get audience to be slightly in that same mental space. And so for me, that comes as the artist is in the space and then trying to understand how this piece of technology, but really it's just this new space to paint with, how do they use them, and come up with a way to build that stage is a way of collaboration, simply with opening the space for them to dream in it.
As it's collaboration is everything. I think for it, especially independent art spaces, and was not institutional kind of spaces like us. But since I was talking about the protest today, a good example might be that so in Korea, when you want to do the protest, more than 2 people, so one person, not really, but from 2 people, you have to register before you protest to occupy the public space. And then and the government or the local government usually say yes or no to that. They should have a good reason to say no, but then it's not always working. So we, as a collective or as a, I run it by myself, the space, but we have good colleagues and the members who are doing it together. I'm just running it by myself. That means like I'm just doing the dirty job, but then everyone is working and participating. They're artists and curators in Gwangju. So we register the protest, and then it didn't work. They didn't like it, so we register as a book club. So we decide to just meet up in the plaza, in the square where the fountain is and stuff. So we were just reading books, and as a main of protest. And then we were reading very bad books. We were reading very, very nasty books that the police didn't like. But then, they didn't really care the title of the book. But anyway, so that's another thing that things are happening outside the space a lot of time. We're in our space, but a lot of things are happening outside, but not alone, with a bunch of people collaborating together. And then we were, one maybe good example to extend is that we're reading the books in front of, like, out of nowhere, basically in the middle of the square, and then just random people just joined us to read. And what I meant by reading a book, we were reading out loud. Sorry, we're not reading secretly. We were just reading out loud, and we're just like reading it like a book club. And then people just join. So I think that's just kind of the collaboration, expected, unexpected, and happening inside and outside the space. And I think that was probably a good example connected to my previous talk, but other collaboration, of course, a lot of them.
The Yangdeng Art Collect started as a collaborative effort between the Sichuan Fine Arts Institute and the village of Yangdeng. So I think that my first interest in the collective is why did the villagers trust this bunch of artists? And I was just very surprised. And I think that they continue to trust artists. I don't think there's a lot of economic gain. Maybe people are simply just retired, and then they're trying to find something to do. But I would like to believe that that's not the fundamental reason behind that, because to do that for a year is simple, but to do it for 13, 14 is, some other ingredients are tangible there, which probably are still not available to me. I also think that when I was trying to write the open call, I was slightly worried that the Sichuan Fine Art Institute faculty would be too interested. So they would totally override the villagers. So I did not kind of advertise what the space was like, and eventually, of course, they did not really care. And then it was all the Yangdeng people and also one or two faculty from the school. I gave a talk and a symposium in December, and that was the only time I showed who were the other artists who have shown at the center in Beijing, including, Song Dong, Peng Wei, Zhang Wang, and then they were very surprised. But I think that a lot of them talked to me afterwards, but it was too late. The works have already, conveniently when I arrived, the works have already been framed and created and shipped away. So I think that the exhibition has begun without them, I suppose. But, that said, I do think that without collaboration with them, without their interest, sometimes their name simply helped me. Like maybe, the president of the Fine Arts Institute and people like that. And I also think that, again, without some of the artists here, the postcard project would not have been possible. So this is really, really, I think, a collaborative effort from the very beginning.
Yeah. I'm going to take my curator hat off and then put on my artist hat and then share a story of collaboration. This was, you saw this online, actually. This was last year. It may come across your newsfeed that for a day, there was a shocking news of OpenAI's new video model was leaked. And yes. And what was happening is that the day before, it was the deadline for the OpenAI Sora video generation competition. And then the artists, in a very fashionable way, we are going to make videos the last day. And in this residency of about 20 artists, there are 5 of us that has that very exclusive access to that tool. And everybody was getting together to make a video. But as we were doing that, the discussion turned from what can we do to make fun of these like AI authoritarian to why do we get paid by privilege of having access to a tool to work for a big company has raised so many millions for free to create content to them. And so instead, the group got together to put together a website that has essentially the API key in the site so that anyone who opened the site can go and create a video that was until then very secretive. And so that website lived for 2 hours before the company figured out and shut it down. But and then you can see this glorious moment of people just making, cats eating corns and fishes flying. In terms of the quality of the video art, it was bad. In terms of the creative resistance that people can have by talking together in the same room, it is incredible 2 hours of glory. And so I think the power of having people talking is tremendous, and therefore, by extension, the importance of having people in the same room and be able to exchange ideas, compete, complain, is also very crucial for pushing some ideas forward.
So I think within that spirit, articulated better than I could have myself, I would like to open it up for questions from audience. Qian, number.
Thank you. Wonderful talks. I enjoy all of them. But this question is particularly for Cheng. So yeah, I'm very so I'm surprised to learn that about your, I guess, department and program. I'm just wondering how you, as a curator, reconcile the potential tension between game and art, because for we know that game, for the most part, is a product that's sold on market, right? It's mobile, it's portable, it's usually virtual, whereas art, especially in an institution, kind of has a specific space. So how much adjustment do you have to do to accommodate that? And then I also have a question from my personal experience. I too have curated an exhibit on game. And I struggle with this idea of, what I produced might be seen as a second-rate game, not pretty lame to play with, and also not so much as art. So I don't know I don't know if you have the same anxiety and how you cope with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Great reality check. So I feel a lot of times when we're asked questions about AI, game, and a lot of technology, we point at photography to be like, they were dismissed before, and then just project that confident, that hopefulness, that yes, this will be recognized as art as well, even though there will be wedding photographer that make a great living as well for their commercial work. I think the way Rad looks at the game to include is a few things. One of them is, can you do it at home? And a lot of times, if you're just like connecting online to play with other people, you can do it at home. And if we brought you all the way in, we're trying to sprinkle some conflict and friction and competition between you and a stranger to encourage that kind of dialogue. And I feel that is something. They're always adjusted for the space, the space, but we're also commissioning one as well. So both could happen. And I shall say that the question you have, even with the artist that is spearheading this effort of making game and making art, has made comments such as, well, if people come out of this game smiling, maybe I have failed it, because this is supposed to be a profound piece of art and not something that people enjoy, right? There's definitely that uncertainty that people feel. And then the reason we named it RAD is to exactly be very comfortable with that ambiguity and figure it out, or present the ambiguity for people to participate in.
I think I'll try to speak loudly. I really like the direction you took with the specific and the general questions about decentralized. I think it worked very well. I was wondering, because you spoke quite a bit about the move yourself space versus the center of the Korean Parliament soul, and these curators who are the wives of great conservatives and presidents. I was wondering did you have a center of these periphery relation with the Gwangju Biennial, which is such a worldwide art praise. So was some of this dynamic playing out, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of the institutional power that we're talking about. But I collaborate with Gwangju Biennale a lot because what happens a lot of times is that Gwangju Biennale mostly or 100% or maybe I probably can't say 100%. Most of the time, the artistic directors are from Western country. Is that correct? Or at least none of them are from Gwangju, from local. So and that's so whenever the new artistic director, they just announced Ho Chunin, by the way, but whenever the new director comes, they always do this like a little trip in the city, right? Because you're new to the city, you have to meet some local artists and local artisan and things. And so I get to meet them all the time and I collaborate with them a lot of times when they're theme is locality and things. But not only Gwangju Biennale, but if you ever been to Gwangju or if you know a little bit about the city this city is like a sandwich. It's like they also have an Asian Cultural Center, ACC, which is I think literally the largest art center, they say. I guess probably they opened in 2015 too. So a lot of things happened in 2015, but anyway, so they are the big organization, and Gwangju Biennale too. The city museum is also huge. They're also a UNESCO Media Art City. So a lot of institutional powers and capital H histories are like really it's filling the whole city. So if you're a local artist or local curator working in Gwangju, that you're like a little sandwich, like your little pickle. You're not even ham. So then you still have to do something. So there's this really sort of the pressure, I would say, that you have to do something really global, something big, something about like Anthropocene or like a big theme as often the biennales and Asia Cultural Centers do. And whereas you still have to find some local themes or local, what do you call that? Local urgent matters that you want to talk about in your local art scene, I think. So I think that's another central sort of power, also central, the institutional central power that you feel live in a city, not only because Gwangju Biennale is like well-known, great biennale, but also because you really have to find yourself and what you can do as a little artist person in the city, but they didn't ask you to do it. You're just doing it. So it's sometimes it's a bit like nobody asked me to do it. I'm just like struggling and like looking for myself. Where should I locate myself and where should I situate myself and etc. So I think that's another pressure. I think pressure is not on everyone, but a lot of times people in Gwangju feel in that way of like there's Ho Chunin there. There's like okay, and we come in and then they're just sitting next to you, and then whereas like you just can't make any art because you don't have any money in Gwangju. So that discrepancy and a little irony, I think it always exists. But I don't think it's only a problem of Gwangju, but I think it really stands out in a context of Gwangju. Yeah. Thank you.
Wrap up? Are you? Yeah. Okay, well, this concludes our panel, but wait, we're going to have more discussion. So first, thank you very much to Ellen, Phil, Min, and Cheng for their presentation. Are we allowed to give people like 3 minutes, or do you want to dive right into it, or give? All right, we're gonna have. Is that okay? We're gonna take a really like a 3-minute break, refresh yourselves, and then we're gonna. It's our tradition to end the symposium with a final wrap-up discussion, and so please return so that all those questions and comments that you didn't get to ask, we're gonna talk about them now. So yes, thank you. You are clearly having too much fun. So please come join us. We'd like to invite the 4 chairs from the panels over the past 2 days to join us on the stage. All right, so how do you want to do this? Do we open it up to questions, or do we have you? Okay. Yeah, that there was limited opportunity for questions earlier. So without further ado, and maybe emulating more Phil's democratic process, we will now invite free questions from the audience. Please question freely for the panels. Comments also can be comments, reflections. So yes.
Yeah, I just had a comment on the title of the whole symposium, Maverick Practices in Asian Art. Why not Maverick Practices in East Asian Art? I mean, because the way it's worded, Asia here simply means East Asia. It excludes the rest of Asia.
Okay. In fact, it started with East Asia, and then we actually look at the kind of rosters like Bajira, like Muslim Dallas, but like South Asia, also Southeast Asia via the Soyeon's presentation. And then also the we talk about Asia, but we are actually looking at diasporas too. The TS, and then like I'm sorry, Brazil, and then like so we are actually thinking larger than East Asia, because the from Ponja's point of view, the actually when 2017 we felt it's East. We tend to be more East Asian because Japan, Korea, China, it's kind of like a scenographic culture sphere. But then we wanted to actually expand to South Asia. So like we wanted to, the topic at that time was actually writing and picturing. So like, it's a conflation of the calligraphy and then visual representation. And then we cannot think about this topic without South Asia. And then so like
even Islamic world on that.
Islamic, wow. So the like thank you. So the like we are in the mode of expansion rather than contraction. So the that's my thinking.
I would also add as well, given the ongoing work of the Center for the Art of East Asia, it was really important for us to not present China, Japan, Korea in a vacuum, rather, engaging in many global contexts. And I think that if I can give a plug for a second to our center's Dispersed Chinese Art Digitization Project, also known as DCADP, this is a project that is really rooted in global collaboration among institutions all over the world. So part of the project is looking at objects that have an origin within China, but were dispersed over time. And so I think that can be a really interesting model for us to think not only about objects, but also practices and ideas, the exchange of ideas. And again, I think just to come back to the ideas of decentralization without centralization, I think that this is a really good opportunity for us to kind of push those ideas forward as well.
Out of battery.
Panels were so thoughtfully put together. Thank you so much. I guess I should have run upstairs. I mean, to the stage. The panels were so beautifully woven together in terms of presenting different openings and configurations for thinking about ways of moving forward the scholarship. And what really stuck to me from the first panel was precisely this dimension of movement, which has been present throughout. And there are different kind of ways in which movement has made itself present throughout. I wonder about the category Asia itself, which is deeply problematic for a number of reasons. I mean, of course, you cannot include everything, right? First of all, and the category itself is, of course, a construction, a historical construction that is predicated on imperial expansion. It is stated, right? At the same time, it provides an opening for an exploration of what Reiko has written about in her work surrounding connections and resonances. So in part, I think what I was seeing today, which I thought was really generative, was really not an expanded geography for the category itself, nor necessarily a reconfiguration, but an invitation, an opening towards thinking about different types of connections and resonances, perhaps along the lines of movement, along the lines of the water, the archipelagic, as Nina suggested, providing one specific model, or Edouard Glissant's idea of a resonant the aesthetics, the poetics of relation, right? Sorry, just at the end of the day, my words start falling off. Yeah. But really thinking a little bit about the dimension of movement and connection and vectoriality as perhaps a way of dealing with this problem, I think is what I'm taking away from today's conversation. So thank you. It's incredibly generative. Thank you again.
Anyone?
In terms of Southeast Asian art, I think we do need to have some specialists in the field, because I've heard Sun Young Ryu's presentation today, and I don't want to say this before, since she had left already, but the artworks she was showing us, like Baguio Arts Guild, those are not Baguio Arts Guild artworks, and I know a little bit about this group because I've been researching and publishing about it. And I do think we need a specialist about Southeast Asian art who can. And she hasn't really seen any of the major archival papers yet also, so I wasn't sure if it was ready to present as an idea.
We will.
I just hearing about South Korea's national art program now, and hearing about Philip engaging with China's national art program now, and thinking about Japan's national art program, if such we can describe such a thing. It's really a relationship with America that is being, changing over time. Any of us talking about this art in this room is really about different imperial relations between these three countries and the United States. And therefore I see with, the rise of interest in South Korea coming after the waning of interest in mainland China, coming after the waning of interest in 80s Japan or 70s Japan, is just like whatever you want to define Asian art as, at least if you're defining it from here, it is really about what the diplomatic and economic relations between the United States and any of these countries is. So the reason why maybe we do not have a Southeast Asian specialist is simply because there's not space for one right now in the United States, because the United States thinks of Vietnam or Thailand as just, this unfair trade partner.